I had something funny to say, but I'm not going to do
Is that Katie's? No, Katie's muted.
it.
Whose house is that?
What if you heard a little beagle barking? That was mine.
That was
I
your
was just
house.
about to say, it sounded just like a beagle.
Yeah, no, that's Daphne. She's our son and daughter-in-law's. I think she's 8-year old, and so they've what was it, a little over a month ago, they moved back from New York City. They're millennials, and they've already purchased a house here in the Fifth Ward.
Oh, that's the wrong ward, Len.
What are you trying to stock voters up there
Man.
Yeah. And then
Where'd they buy a house over in the Fifth?
on Tilly, actually.
Really?
Very nice house. Yeah, very nice little house, and so it's great. It's close to us, and
And what do they do for a living?
they work from home. Kirsten works for Victoria's Secret, and Dan is a personal trainer.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Where did he go to school? I'm curious.
Oneana.
Okay.
Yep.
That was all my undergrad work. So
Yeah.
whenever I hear that, I'm always curious to see where they came out of for that.
Yeah, he's done very well. Primary education wasn't his forte, but as soon as he got to college, I can remember one day I received a letter from the president of the college. I'm like, oh no, what did he do now? And it actually turned out he made the president's list, and that's the way it was for his entire college career. I have no idea
Nice.
what was the problem in primary education, but he got to college and he flourished.
Well, that's what counts, right?
Well, that and,
However you do at the end.
since then he's done very well with life. So
You guys are live and you've got 6 after. I don't
Okay.
know if
Haven't seen the mayor yet. Has anybody else?
No, it doesn't look like he's on here. I don't see him.
no, he's not on the call yet.
Sorry.
Katie-
that gives
Katie
Dave a
Tatz
couple
and-
more minutes to drink his Irish coffee there.
Carrie, do you have the ability to move our screens around?
I don't. As cameras go in and out, off and on, it changes how everything displays and loads. So it pushes cameras to the primary generally.
Hmm.
So as people turn it off and on, it generally shifts.
Yeah. Yeah, because like I said last night, I use my iPad, and so I can't capture everybody that's on a meeting. But
Do you only have the presenter view or do you have a gallery view up?
I have a gallery, but I only see 9.
You don't have a laptop there or a desktop?
No, I have a laptop and I have a PC all in one, but I don't know. The iPad seems to work the best. Because I'm like you, Dave, I want to see the documents, so I'm not quite techie enough to where I can see you guys and see my documents all at the same time.
Yeah, it bugs me if I can't see it. But there's times I just print out a hard copy, which is going old school. But
Well, I was going to suggest that if we're going to keep doing Zoom meetings, that maybe we could get packets of our information sent out to us before the meeting.
yeah, we got to find out where we are with that. Because didn't we pass the deadline for when it was supposed to be re-upped?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody know?
Tonight is the end of the executive order that was signed by the governor. And I keep refreshing to see if he's re-signed. He likes to re-sign at the last minute.
Okay,
So
so nothing yet. And do we have another location we can go to yet?
not that I'm aware of. I know that we're working on stuff, but nothing is.
We can't use the armory.
Got to
Katie
bring
could
an
probably
umbrella and a
answer that.
broom.
Sure. So I'll jump in here. So we've been, I mean, in terms of the executive order, I just checked again, the governor's nightly update just came out and there was no word on extending the executive order with regard to remote meetings. That said, the mayor has some guidance from his control room group on it, where basically they said that it's not going to be a huge deal if you have to continue. They want governments and people just generally making good common sense decisions. If you don't have an appropriate space available, then there's going to be no harm in continuing on temporarily, you know, with remote meetings. So he could probably speak to that a little bit better. In terms of an alternate location, Greg and I we took measurements, we've looked around. There's no great space to hold meetings on city property. The Armory is an option, but there's no HVAC. There's a lot of other challenges that we could talk about. So I've been working on with Foothills to see if they would be an option. I think it might come down to cost. I haven't gotten the final cost out of them. I don't know if it'll be cost effective for us or not. I checked in with Jeff Doyle yesterday afternoon again. I think he's the manager. I'm not really sure what his role is, but he's super helpful and he's my contact there. And he had indicated that they received our request and they're considering it and they want to help us, but that they have to get kind of their safety plan and reopening plan kind of in place before they could make a determination. So Greg, I don't know if you have anything to add on the space utilization, but Greg and I, honestly, I think we've thought of everything, but if not, we're certainly happy to hear other suggestions in terms of alternate spaces.
What about the
So
only
we
other
would,
meeting?
we would require the space that we would use for our meetings to be sanitized, I guess for simplistic terms.
Well, it's cleaning protocol, but it's also the actual space. So one problem that Greg and I have often identified with the current council chambers is that it has an inflexible and immovable layout. After, Carrie kind of looked at it from a camera angle and Greg and I looked at it with John, our streets and facilities guy, there's no real great way for members of the public and members of the council or the boards to come in and sit in a way and conduct business where it would, really make sense and be able to, maintain the appropriate, 6-foot social distance between people. So it's cleaning, it's size, it's layout. I mean, it's a variety of factors. Like I said, again, I think that Greg and I have tried to consider every option, but again, if anybody has any other suggestions, of course, we'll look into them.
Well, I was going to suggest the Vets Club. It's wide enough to get us in there easily and hold, I don't know, I'd have to do the math, but I would say probably 10 to 10, well, 6 foot apart. So probably 10 general public. So I don't know. It would be the cleaning part that I would question whether we're.
What about Greater Plains Gym or Riverside Gym?
Yeah.
Or Suco.
The reopening plan for the school district included a section where they were not going to be permitting the leasing of their facilities. Now, whether that extends to government purposes or not, I would presume so, it would be all inclusive. But part of their, I think it was like an 80-page document that they released, indicated kind of a restriction on leasing.
Has anybody heard from Gary at all?
Currently calling him now.
Katie's trying to get him now.
So I guess, Dave, if we go back to our discussion of paper, I personally would like to have it because I'm printing everything out so that I can take notes. But
I go back and forth with it. I mean, I like to see it, Some like for our council meetings, I'll print off a hard copy so I can take notes on it. Not every time.
True, that's the way I am. Like I didn't print off pages 2 and 3 of Ginny's agenda. And it's in the charter, so,
Yeah.
but I printed off her agenda so that I could follow along and take notes.
I'm sorry, Len, I just got back. My daughter collided with the dog and so are we starting the meeting or?
No, yeah, Gary hasn't gotten on board yet.
Okay.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. I tried to get Gary. I haven't been able to get him. I just checked with Merzig and he said that at this point you probably should just get started, given that it's 7:15.
Well, Ginny, you want to take us through this?
Yes, thank you, David. What I wanted to do tonight is just an introduction to the budget process and to update you on general information to get you thinking, get you started as far as dealing with the budget process that we'll be going through really until the first week in December. I provided the charter guidelines. I know it's in the charter, but I thought maybe it would be easier just to have it on the agenda. I had also provided this to the Finance Committee a couple meetings ago. It just lays out the guidelines within the charter, and I just thought it would be a good reference for everybody to refresh and just have at your fingertips. And I just want to touch base a little bit on the internal processes of what we do. We have within our accounting systems ways for the department heads to put in their budget requests. Last year, we had those budget requests due by September 30th, and we've moved it up and we've asked the department heads to have them in by August 31st. Last year, we were a little bit time crunched by the time we got all the requests in, so we thought if we moved it up 30 days, it would give us more time to work with it, especially since we have such a challenging budget year. We're also trying to go fully electronic this year. Joe has set up on an internal drive here at the city files for every department head. They have tools to use as far as we've given them histories for 2019, we've given them histories for 2020 year-to-date actuals. We also gave them reports on all of their requests that they put in the 2020 budget versus the adopted. We've given them work papers to fill out their payroll requests. We're giving them the fee schedule to update any requests that they might want to increase the city's fees, for example, code enforcement, things like that. We're also giving them the capital plan for their input. So this is all going to be done electronically, which I think is going to work really well, not only during a COVID situation, but in the future. It'll just make things much more efficient. And so we're setting that process up hopefully to follow in years to come. We take all that information once all the department heads have put in their information, and then Joe and I will sit and we'll analyze it. And we'll look for things that are missing, and we'll communicate with the department heads, get their input, answer their questions. If we have questions, we'll contact them. So we have a good exchange going back and forth. There are several costs that Joe and I budget internally within the finance department. And for example, we do all of wages, we do all fringe benefits, we do debt, we do certain codes. For example, we do utilities and vehicle fuel. It's based on history. So there's quite a bit of detail that goes into it. And then once we compile all that information, that's when we start developing the budget presentations. So I just want to give you a little bit of background on our internal processes. And for guidelines, though, we want to tell the department heads where the council might be going with their goals during this budget season. So sometimes we, as I said in my second section of the agenda, possible financial targets. And in the past, they have requested to have a balanced budget with revenues equal to expenditures without using any fund balances. I personally don't think that's going to be possible for 2021, just due to the unknowns of COVID. and how long the effects will last, I don't know. I really can't give you, even at this point, updated effects of COVID because things are always so delayed in when we receive our revenues. I do know our mortgage tax is up. I do know that our parking ticket revenues are down. Our ambulance calls are down by about 300. Our sales tax, though, through the month of May, we're only down by about 147,000 year to date. So I want to just back up for 1 minute. The 2020 budget, had COVID not happened, we would have exceeded every revenue budget number, almost every revenue budget number in the budget. Our sales tax was, by the end of February, we were already over by 61,000 of what we had anticipated. Our interest earnings were going to exceed what we had. So our 2020 budget was solid and it was good estimates. And had COVID not happened, we would be really sitting very well right now. Having said that, we have to deal with the realities of COVID happening. So what we need to look at is the limits on the use of our fund balances and our reserves. What do we want to do for 2021? Do we want to pick a number? Do we want to pick a percentage? Or do we want to look at it project by project or item by item? What we've been trying to do with fund balances, whenever we use the reserves, we try to focus in on one-time items. It's something that's not going to repeat budget after budget. So just kind of keep that in mind. We also like, since the tax cap has been instituted at the state level, we have maintained within that tax cap ever since it's been instituted. And I would suggest that we continue that if possible. And then our debt expenditures have been in the past not to exceed 5% of the general fund expenditures. We have adopted policies for our debt policy. We also have adopted policies for our fund balance. I want to present updated policies to the council to consider. For example, right now our unrestricted fund balance is to be at least 35% of our expenditures. I would actually like to suggest to the council that we raise that to 45%. The reason being is in times like this, we're depending on our fund balance. During the flood of 2006, we depended on our fund balance before we got all of our FEMA aid. In the flood of 2011, again, we depended on our fund balance. Our fund balance also allows us not to have to do revenue anticipation notes when we have capital projects that we haven't received our bonding for yet. So having a strong fund balance saves the city money in many different measures where we don't have to go out and do short-term loans or capital notes or revenue anticipation notes. So having a strong fund balance benefits us in many ways. So those are possible financial targets for you to consider. And we can also consider others if you would like. Meg had put together a comprehensive policy manual that I think was distributed to all of you back in January when you first got sworn into office. That booklet was put together in 2015. It needs to be updated and it needs to be modernized to the 2021 practices. So that's going to be a goal for Joe and I to get that ready and give it to you for consideration as far as recommendations. So the mayor had brought up a very good point. Yes.
Thank you, Jenny. I just wanted to see if we could just take a pause. So under the major revenue sources, you're anticipating that sales tax is down by 147,000 so far today.
To date, yes. Through May's collection, it's down to 147,000.
And trending ambulance calls, I believe you said, is down by 300 calls.
By 300 calls year to date. I just checked it this afternoon.
Okay,
I think it's a little over 300.
Okay, so a constant revenue source would be the fire protection contract with the town, right? That's not going to change?
That's not, well, the fire protection contract is based on a formula. So that it may change depending on how the formula works out. We take expenditures of the fire department, we subtract revenues that come in from the ambulance, and then we have a percentage allocation based on full evaluation. So that number is going to fluctuate every year, but it's going to be in the $1 million range. It might go to 950, it might go up to 1.1. It's just going to depend on the year's activity.
So we could see a little bit less because we're trending 300 calls less right now for the
Or
EMS.
we could see a little bit more because our revenue is down, but our expenditures are being maintained.
Okay.
Okay.
And then state aid, I apologize if I didn't hear you. Did you mention, are you anticipating a decrease in the amount of state aid coming this way?
They have not announced it yet. I think the governor is waiting to see what this last package is for at the federal level to see if they're going to provide any aid to the municipalities. The way I understand it is if the state receives federal aid, they don't plan on cutting the local aid by the 20%. Maybe they'll only cut it by 5 to 10%. Maybe they won't cut it at all, but we don't have a decision yet.
Okay. And then the tax levy, are you anticipating that because of COVID that there'll be a certain amount of constituents, residents that are not going to be able to pay?
No, the tax levy is solid. We have an agreement with the county that the city is made whole on their tax levy. So the county will enforce any unpaid taxes. And so as far as the tax levy, you don't have to worry about losing any revenues there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I just wanted to talk to you about the predetermined amounts that will be in the 2021 budget. Joe will be compiling these numbers, so I'm hoping that as soon as we have these, we'll be able to share it with the council. This comprises about 70% of the budget. So the union wages based on the union contracts, that's going to be set by whatever the contracts have in place at this moment. Fringe benefits are also according to the contracts or according to the government regulations. Fringe benefits are the payroll taxes. FICA is for Social Security and Medicare. Health insurance is the current contracts that we have with Excel. We will be bringing you renewals. Katie and I are working with the health insurance brokers for our 2020 renewals. We stressed to them last week in a meeting that we're expecting a very, I want to say almost 0% increase in our rates, if not a reduction, based on what we were looking at. I cannot guarantee if that's going to happen, but I just want you to know that that was our presentation to them. Also, our dental and vision insurance, right now those numbers, they're not big costs, but the plans are what we have offered in the contracts. Retirement is set by New York State. We have no control over that number. And then we have the supplemental BBL 207 payments. That is for a firefighter who has retired on a disability. And I don't know if you know of the 207 law, but when that happens, we have to supplement that particular firefighter's disability that they're receiving from the state to bring them up as if they were still on our payroll. Currently, we have one firefighter that is in that situation. And I think that goes through, I want to say 2027, 2028, somewhere in that mark. And right now, it's about a $28,000 annual expense. Debt service. Debt service is predetermined according to our schedules. Property taxes, we have to pay property taxes on the airport property, and we have to pay some property taxes on some of our different water distribution materials that are on other municipalities' lands. Those we have no control over, they're set by the other municipalities. Our insurance policies, we have insurance policies that we're mandated to have. I will be meeting with our insurance agent to go over the renewals. Most of our insurance is with NYMER. We have benefited greatly by being a member of that organization. Our rates are usually raised very slowly, knock on wood that it's going to stay that way for 2021. And the one thing that I will be bringing to you to consider is, and it's a small item, but I want to be transparent about it. We've never had this before, but I would like to investigate having insurance for cyber attacks. We have strong protection now through our IT with Pyramid. We have, like, I want to say, it's just incredibly impressive of how many protections they have for us. But this would just be an extra benefit just in case, but I will be presenting that to you for consideration. Utilities, again, that is something that's out of our control. We budget based on averages and projections. We look at We go on site, there's different sites for fuel, gas, and electricity. We do have a contract for electricity that takes us through a good portion of 2021. I want to say about 9 months. So those numbers are pretty fixed. So when you take all of these sections, it's about 20 or about 70% of the budget, which is already predetermined even before we sit down and to look at it in its entirety. And then the mayor made the suggestion, which I think was a very good one, to tell the council what items that they really have control over. So I just gave you a little bit of a list here. Equipment purchases. Equipment purchases, no equipment can be purchased by any department head if it has not been approved by council. It either has to be approved in the budget or it has to be approved by motion. And so equipment purchases will be looking at every equipment request for the council to decide if it will be in the 2021 budget. Connected to that is the 5-year capital plan. The 5-year capital plan is mainly designed by Greg, and then he and I and Judy go over possible funding sources for it. We touched on this last night. What we showed you last night were the large projects. It's not everything. We didn't show you vehicle replacements and things like that. So we'll be expanding on the 5-year capital plan. I do suggest that we have one separate meeting just to discuss that because it will be a lot of information. Staffing levels. You will have the opportunity to approve any new positions that may come through requests in the 2021 budget. You may also have to consider our current staffing levels if things look really bleak. There, again, I will depend on Katie's guidance as far as if it comes to that point, as far as what we're able to do and not do. Purchase service contracts. This covers a lot. For example, if we're purchasing to haul our waste from the wastewater treatment plant, if we're making purchase services to do road repairs, there's several different categories of this type of expense. Some of them are routine year after year after year. For the ones that are not routine, I will be bringing those to you in detail so you can decide if this is something that you want to approve. Transfers to capital projects, this ties into the 5-year capital plan. What Greg and I laid out last year in the budget is we would like our contributions from the general water and sewer funds to be almost predictable year to year. So that way, when we are looking at the 5-year capital plan and we're also looking at expenditures, it can be predictable and consistent. Administrative salaries. In the month of December, you will be adopting the administrative manual for 2021. We laid out a grid last year in the administrative manual that allows for $1,000 increases for each non-unionized person that's a member of that manual. We thought that it was a good approach. It was predictable. It was a slow growth, and it treated everybody fairly. I'm hoping that will be considered again. I think that you will see an administrative manual. There's a grid in there where every position is on a different grid. It has a minimum and a maximum. When we created it last year, there was enough room for every employee to still have growth without hitting the maximum. The overtime. Overtime is looked at by averages, 3-year averages, usually for DPW. Smaller departments, it's very small. Most of the overtime that the city incurs outside of DPW is police and fire. We know that fire overtime has been a very costly item. I will tell you, in the past several pay periods, the fire overtime has been $13,000, $14,000, $9,000, $10,000, and a majority of it is to cover leave time. I'm going to stress it again, 60% of the overtime is to cover leave time. Yes, Luke?
I'm sorry, Jeannie. I think my mic blinked out. You said the majority of it is to cover what? Overtime and what?
Leave time. The fire leave overtime is to cover vacation time, holiday time, sick time, for people that are not there. So
Thank
this is a topic that you're going to have consideration over. Do we change practices? Do we change the SOP? There's different options. One of the best options that we have been doing so far is bringing on part-time firefighters. Supplementing the crews with the part-time firefighters will hopefully provide the coverage that we need for when the other firefighters are on leave.
Excuse me, Jen.
Also, yes.
Since I don't have it in front of me, how are we for the amount of overtime that we're planning for this year in this year's budget? Are we targeted to go over that?
Yeah, yes, I'm going to say yes. I don't have the number right in front of me, David. We just did a $70,000 transfer, I want to say maybe 2 councils ago. It's getting eaten up pretty quickly. So I will be analyzing that again and then bringing it back to the council.
Okay.
What we've done is we've taken the part-time budget that we had for the part-timers for 2020, and we've been moving it to the overtime line. Yes, Len?
What is the formula to figure out the overtime budget?
What we do is we look at history. And what I usually do for overtime is I take a 3-year history average for overtime hours. And then I take the regular hour rate for every firefighter or every police officer. I get the average, and then I take that at 1.5 times. So it's usually, say the average overtime is 5,000 hours for the past 3 years. I'll take that and multiply it by the average overtime rate. Yes.
So how do we get a overtime budget of 158,000 if that represents a 3-year average?
Last year, we cut the overtime budget because we were planning on having almost over I want to say over 4,100 hours of part-time.
Sure, I understand that, but if we look at 3 years of overtime, we average that out. In 2020, that should have been the number. It can't be 158,000 because you've given this speech several times where they're well over their overtime budget. So I'm just trying to understand the formula that was used.
Right. If you looked at the previous year, I think the overtime budget was 275,000, and it ended up moving up to over 400,000.
It was budgeted for 270,000,
275, if I remember correctly.
but they went to 475.
I want to say they went to like 441.
Isn't 400 and some thousand? Isn't that been kind of the average in overtime for several years though?
Not for several years. 2000. Let me back up. 2018 was extraordinary. They had over 10,000 hours of overtime. But
Right.
again, this is a conversation that we can have in more detail. But I'm just letting you know this is one of the areas that you can concentrate on. Another item is training and travel. We can detail out training and travel for you. If you want that information. Contingency is a number that we also have control over. Normally, we take at least. We try to keep it in a range of between 1% and 5% of the budget. Normally, it will be about 150,000 to 200,000. I would like that number to stay there because there's a lot of unforeseen things that come up during the year, but again, that's an item that you can definitely have control over. And then the use of the reserves. So. And then, are there any questions so far? Okay. The major revenue sources, we touched on that earlier in the discussion, but I just wanted you to know that these 5 areas creates the majority of the revenues for the city of Orleans general fund budget. That's the tax levy. Yes, Luke.
Ginny, what of those 5, what do we receive typically the most income, assuming COVID aside, typically receive most income from?
The tax levy and the sales tax. Both of them are over $4 million. So the tax levy, the sales tax, the ambulance fees, I want to say it's very fortunate that we did raise the ambulance fees last year for 2020 because with the reduction of the number of calls that we've had so far, at least we're benefiting from a little bit of higher revenue because the rate did go up. The fire protection town contract we talked about already, and then state aid. And as I said, we haven't received any notifications. I see the mayor's now with us. I don't know if he has any updated information on that, but as of right now, I don't have any updated information on the possibility of cutting state aid. So outside, this is just a brief overview to try to get the thinking process started, to get your feedback, to ask you as far as maybe the tax levy, do you want me to stay under the 2% tax cap? Just so you know, we're able to roll over what we did not tax last year. That was a little over $55,000. So we'll be able to add that on to this year's calculation. We'll be putting all those numbers together. And I also want you to know that Joe Tennant, the deputy director, is going to be very involved this year in the budget process. He's working with the department heads. He'll be working with their requests, developing reports, putting in the information into our computer program. He's also wonderful at making PowerPoints and graphs. So we're going to try to have a lot of visuals for you. And he will be involved in future presentations. We're going to kind of tag team between the two of us and try to get him more involved in the process. And the last item that I have on the list are target dates. I'll leave it up to the council members and the mayor as far as when you want to meet again. But I just wanted to let you know, as I said earlier in the meeting, our department requests are due by August 31st. The draft budget, I would like to get to the council by October 15th. Or I shouldn't say that. I'd like to have the draft budget created for Joe and I to examine by October 15th and then get it to the council by October 27th. Last year, we had some feedback from the council members that they didn't have enough time to work with it. So I want to make sure that we meet your needs and give you ample time to be able to study the detail. Some people are going to want very high surface information. Some people are going to want to see line by line detail. Joe and I will have both types of information available for you. Just let us know what your preference is. Now, according to the charter, the preliminary budget will be due to the city council on the second meeting in November. That is November 17th. Then 1 week later, we will have a public hearing, which will be November 24th. And then the adopted budget will be December 2nd. So any questions, any information that I didn't cover? As I said, I just wanted to make this an introduction, a brief overview of the process, and to highlight the major expenditures and revenues that you'll be seeing within the budget. Yes, Mark?
So you talked about these financial targets that you'd like us to set. What is the timeline that you want that information by?
As soon as you're ready to provide it, I would like it. But as the mayor pointed out in a meeting that we had last week, the targets can be set, but they can also be moved because of circumstances that come up. So if right now you say you want to stay within the tax cap, and all of a sudden something happens dramatically in October, and we're like, oh man, we can't stay within the tax cap because of COVID or whatever. So I don't want you to think that the targets are set in stone, because they can be liquid. But if you can just give us a little bit of guideline, so when we're preparing the budget, we know that we're hitting what you are expecting. I don't want to surprise you and say, here, look, I've put in a 1.5% tax increase, and you say, no, we don't want it that high. I will tell you, I'm a very strong advocate for slow, steady increases. It behooves everyone in the long run, because what happens is that money starts to compound. So when you have a year with a zero tax increase, it's like your feet are stuck in the mud because you can't move forward. But if you have a 1% increase, which will raise about $48,000, then the next year you'll have another 1% increase. So now instead of it being $48,000, it'll be $96,000. And then the next year after that, it'll just compound as you go through, because it'll be new money generated. So and that's also what I look for in the water and sewer rates. Yes, David.
Do we know what staying at the tax cap will give us this year as for an increased revenue?
The latest information that I received, it was 1.56%. So let me just do a quick calculation. I want to say our levy is 1,000,000 or 4,800,000. So that would be 74,000, and then we could add the rollover of 55,000. These are very rough numbers, David. When I get to the state controller's website, I'll be plugging in the numbers.
Okay.
But I won't really be doing that until I have more information for the budget. And then once I get those calculations, that number will be more definite.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Everybody's quiet. Scott.
That's because I can't figure out how to get my mute off. So last year was, what was the tax increase last year? That was like 1.5, right?
Yes, it was 1.5 on the levy, but let me get my budget in front of me. It was the levy, no, it was 1.75 last year. And then the tax rate, that varies based on assessment. So even though your levy is going to go up, say 1 to 2%, does not mean the tax rate is going to go up that same percentage, because that is based on assessed valuation. So the levy went up 1.75%, which increased, raised $81,834 in tax levy, but the rate went up a little over 19 cents per thousand, which ended up being just over 2%.
Now, I know the county hasn't set theirs yet, but they're looking at going over 2%. Have you had any contact with Alan about how much over 2% they're looking?
No, I saw Alan, I want to say about a week ago. He stopped by at City Hall to see me, and he informed me, and I think I mentioned this at the meeting the other night. He said that even though the sales tax revenue for the month of, I think it was May or June, went down for Otsego, for the state, Otsego County broke even. So I'm still waiting to see the check to find out if that is accurate statement, but that was what he informed me of. But he did not mention at that time anything for their particular budget. I can always check with him, but I did see the headlines in the paper that they had planned on going over the tax cap. If that process is decided upon by the council, it takes a vote to do that. Then I have to explain to the state what the reasons were for it, just so you know the process.
Now, are we looking at an increase in the sewer and water funds this year? Is that?
Yes, as I've mentioned before, we have been, last year we laid out a 5-year plan for at least 5% increases in the rates for the next 5 years. This is to provide funds for the infrastructure repairs that need to be done and the debt payments that will be required for those repairs. And remember, on the wastewater treatment plant, we've got the $8 million project going on down there, and about $6 million of it's going to be funded through the EFC. It is a 0% loan, so it's not going to be costing any interest, which is a wonderful thing for the taxpayer, but it will require the debt payment to be made on that. And yes, David.
To go above the tax cap, not that I would want to do this necessarily, but what's required? It can't be just a simple vote of the council. Is it a supermajority?
I believe it's a supermajority of the vote.
Okay.
I will confirm that, but I do know that it needs to be voted by council. I don't think it has to be unanimous, but I think it has to be 2/3. But let me double check on that for you, David, and I can email that out to you. And
if you can find out if that's the same rule for the county, that'd be great.
I believe it's the same rule for every municipality within New York State.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Luke.
Judy, just a confirmation. My cat walked on my screen. You said that the tax rate is currently at 1.56%. Is the cap?
I believe that was what the information was. I'm doing this from memory. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But I
No, that's
believe it
okay.
was- Yeah, it was, I believe it's at 1.56 for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Just so you know, in the tax cap calculation, not only is it the percentage set by the state, but you also have a growth factor, and then you also have a rollover factor, and then you also have a exemption factor. All of those things determine the amount that you're able to actually levy. I will present that report to you so you can see it in detail if you want, or you can just accept the numbers. Yes, David.
All right, one more question. That 74,000 that you gave for the 1.56%,
Yes.
do you have a number of what that would be per household per thousand?
Not right at the moment.
No.
I would have to, I will have all that information.
I
but-
figured you would. I
Yeah.
didn't know if you had it in
Yeah.
front of you.
No,
That's-
I wasn't planning on doing detail at this meeting. I really just wanted to set the tone, to present the process, to get you guys thinking as far as what you want feedback on. And, you know, you're very welcome to email Joe and I questions, but as the mayor has suggested in the past, the questions should be copied to all council members and the mayors and Katie and Greg, so everyone is involved and they all get the same answer, because they may all have the same question. They might not have thought of it yet. Scott?
This might be more for Katie, but do we have any outstanding contracts, or are we going to be having to go into any contract negotiations for this budget year that we're going to have to take into consideration?
So right now we have negotiated settled contracts with the fire union, I think through 2022, and with the CSEA through 2021. Our contracts with the PBA and the police sergeants both expire at the end of this year. I reached out to each of them, asking them how they wanted to handle negotiations, whether they wanted to do a one-year extension, because, you know, it's obviously not the best negotiation environment right now, having some, you know, uncertainties in the budget. They are considering that, and they're going to get back to me, and I will get back to you as to how they will handle that. So obviously, Scott, you know, but just for the benefit of all, you know, who are here, if the contract expires, then the terms continue exactly as they are in perpetuity until we have a new contract that supersedes the old one. So we won't, even if we don't come up with an extension or negotiate a new contract to be effective in January of 2021, the contract will continue under the exact same terms. Does that answer the question, Scott?
Yeah, thank you.
Len, you had a question before?
I did, Jenny. So the fleet and equipment master plan that we have in this year's budget on page 105, is that still a static or is that a dynamic document for us?
Right now, I believe it's, Greg can add to this, but right now I believe that is a static. That what was in that plan is what was purchased this year. And we will get an updated schedule from Charlie. And Scott, just so you know, the enterprise information was just sent to me and Charlie this week. We never got Shane's email, so I haven't had any time to look at the figures. But I will tell you quickly, when we met with him via Zoom, I was doing quick math on if we were to lease every vehicle that the city owns versus purchasing every city vehicle that the city owns, the numbers were almost exact. But that was a very quick calculation. So maybe once I get into the detail and actually study it, there'll be a different conclusion.
I guess, Jenny, for me, I was looking at 2021 on page 105, and I was just wondering if the early thoughts from the department heads were this is still the equipment that they want. So that
I can't answer that question right now, Len. I haven't had any feedback from the department heads yet. And normally what happens is I will meet with Greg, John Williams, Charlie, Dave Hoteling, and usually Stan, and we go over all the vehicle requirements or requests that they have, and that's how it gets into the plan. We also talk about what can we postpone, what can we repair, what can we make last one more year. So we go over that in pretty intense detail. Once
Okay,
we
so-
have that detail, we'll present it to you.
Right, but that probably won't be, will that be before October 27th?
Oh, yes, I'm hoping, one of the things we need to do is determine how often you want to meet. In talking with the mayor last week, we thought once a month. But I do think one meeting should be dedicated to the 5-year capital plan for all the capital projects, including the fleet. Because that's going to be a lot of information and it's going to be a lot of dollars to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Also, in the past, we've discussed the general fund at one meeting and then the water and sewer funds at another meeting, just because it's so much information to absorb. But I will respect your wishes, and if you want, you know, how often you want to meet, the topics that you want to discuss. Scott?
I know Mark Davies asked this question. I forgot the answer already. How soon were you looking for, like, if we want to stay at like the top of the cap at what was it, 1.56, I think you said, or if we want to be at 1%, or if we just say, look, last year's budget was 17 million, that's where we want to stay for this year. How quick do you need to know that?
If you could give feedback to Joe and I by mid-September, that would be really good, because by then we would be analyzing the department's requests and putting the numbers together, and then analyzing the possible revenue sources. We would also, by mid-September, I'm hoping to have more current information on the effects of COVID. Right now, you know, I'm knocking on wood that with the college students coming back, and with the reopenings that we have had, that maybe some of our revenue projections are not going to be as bad. But I'm saying that as I'm knocking on my desk. It's just too early to tell, because everything just takes time to come in.
And if for some reason the students don't come back, I'm assuming that's going to impact us adversely as well.
Well, the biggest impact in my viewpoint with the students, if they don't come back, it's going to be for the water and sewer funds. Because right now, the billings from the colleges is very low as far as their water usage. And I pointed that out back in June when we were talking about the possible revenue losses. It's going to be, that's where the major impact will be. OPT, as far as the colleges either being here or not, we've got the CARES money to cover those revenue losses. Any other questions? Joe, I know you're on. Would you like to add any comments? Would you like to come out of hiding?
No, not at this time. Sorry, not at this time. I think you've hit a lot of it, and you know, it is a kind of an unusual year, so we'll certainly try and be flexible and take input from everyone. So that's all.
Would you like to decide on the next meeting date at this meeting? Do we want to schedule it for some time in September after we have the department head's input?
I think that would work. If anybody, I'll go first. Yeah, I think that would work well for me, Jenny.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Luke. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. I can also, we can also bring it up at finance, and we could decide a date after that, or we could decide tonight. That way we've got a target. I don't know if September is too far out for everybody's calendar.
It's okay with me if it's okay with everybody else to schedule it tonight. For me, it's better to schedule way in advance.
Okay. Mayor, do you have a preference, Mayor?
No, whatever works for everybody is good with me.
September 9th. Just throwing a date out there. It's a Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday's good.
Around the same time, are we thinking?
I just want you to know September 9th is not going to give us much time to work with the department head's requests because they're not due until October 30 or August 31st. So if we could possibly go out another week, that would just give us another week to put some numbers together.
So the 16th?
I could do the 16th. Does 7 o'clock work for everybody?
There is a planning commission meeting on the 16th at 7 o'clock. They'll be using the chambers, just so you're aware.
Not unless we kick you out.
What about, what do we have on the 15th? The Tuesday?
I believe that would be the environmental board meeting, but that's not confirmed.
What about the Thursday, the 17th?
You're wide open on the city calendar.
Can everybody do
That
the
would work.
17th, the Thursday?
I believe I could.
Confirm the date again.
That'd be September 17th. That's a Thursday.
Carrie, there's commission's not meeting on that day, is it? For human rights and community relations?
No, you'll be good. They won't meet until the 24th that month.
Okay. I'm open in that case.
That was at 7 p.m.
I think so. It's fine for me.
Yep.
Works for me as well.
Jenny, I just wanted to ask you just kind of a general question. So last year's budget was 17 million. Under your opinion today, given everything that you've discussed with us tonight, what do you think the budget's going to be for 2021?
Oh, come on, I cannot answer that question. The 2020 budget was 17 million, but you got to remember we had over $1 million, I want to say 800,000 from the reserves. I don't know if we'll be doing that again in 2021. So Joe and I will be working on projections. And so I don't want to throw out a guesstimate for 2021 without actually studying the numbers. I don't think that is a proper thing to do at this moment.
Okay. Well, I was just looking at your notes and it, you know, if 70% of the budget is already predetermined, I was going to say that you really only have 30% that we're going to guess at.
Well, as I said, Joe is working on the 2021 payroll budget, but we have to take everybody through their steps. It's kind of a grinding process. It's not like we just apply a percentage. And we have to move their salary base, we have to move their longevity base. Then we look at health insurance, we look at retirement, we look at also the retirees' health insurance. It's a lot of detailed work. I just wouldn't want to give you a quote, Len, and then mislead you in any way. I'd rather give you accurate information. And as we get the predetermined numbers calculated, I can share that with the finance committee and the council as a whole, just as an informational discussion.
That would be great. Thank you.
What my goal is, and what Joe's goal is as a team, we want to make sure that all of you have enough information to work with and that you have enough time to work with it so we can meet your requirements to have enough information to make good decisions with. Yes, Luke.
Hey, Ginny, I just wanted to thank you on this is it. You know, I can't imagine how overwhelming this must be for all of you that are really in the front lines doing this. But I really appreciate the time that everybody took to present this. Being this personally my first big budget that I've worked on, it helps a lot. So I wanted to thank you.
You're very welcome. Also, just so you know, if you've read the budget for 2020, there's smaller funds that are involved. We don't talk about them quite as much detail. They're usually controlled by restricted donations, a lot of what we call our miscellaneous special revenue. So you'll be seeing those items too. We'll also have an OPT budget and a budget for Central Garage. Those two funds are considered proprietary funds, so they're a little bit of a different budget process there. They're treated more like business books than they are governmental books. Everybody's very quiet.
Do we have anything else? Are we all set?
I think I'm good.
I think Gary froze. Oh, no, he's moving.
So thank you, Jenny. This has been really helpful.
You are very welcome. I'm always open up for questions, so is Joe. Just reach out.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
You're very welcome.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Take care, folks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.